City, where there has been an update on the health of Pope Francis this afternoon. In their latest statement, officials are saying that the Pope remains in critical condition and is having kidney issues. On a positive note, they say he is alert and, quote, well-oriented. Remember that earlier in the day, they said the 88-year-old pontiff had rested well overnight after suffering a respiratory crisis on Saturday morning. Hello, everyone. I'm Natasha Fata, and you're watching CBC News Network. For the very latest on the updates on the Pope's health, we are joined by CBC's Megan Williams in Vatican City.
The update came at about 7 o'clock Rome time, as it usually does. In the latest update, as you say, said the Pope remains in critical condition, although he has not had any breathing crisis. Yesterday, he had a prolonged asthma-like respiratory crisis, the Vatican said. That hasn't happened today. The Vatican gave to the Pope yesterday 2 units of red blood cells, which have helped stabilize his hemoglobin levels. Also, the levels of the platelets have stabilized, again, related to the blood that he received. But what is alarming, which is, as you mentioned, he is starting to show signs of early signs of kidney failure. Now, the statement said that those signs are under control for now, so that is positive. He's been on high-flow oxygen today. Again, he didn't have a breathing crisis, but he needs extra oxygen to breathe properly. He's awake, he's alert, and talking as well. But again, the main message is the Pope remains in critical condition.
Well, in terms of reaction to these latest updates, what are you seeing?
Well, here at the Vatican, it's Holy Jubilee year, so there have been thousands of pilgrims coming, many hoping to have seen the Pope either at a mass or his Sunday Angelus, which he didn't deliver today or last Sunday. Here are a couple of visitors from Brazil who expressed how they feel about the news that the Pope is not doing well in hospital.
I was very sad the day I got the news because I was really wishing I could see his audition. His mass. And yeah, it kind of interfered with those expectations. I hope he gets well.
Since the day I came to Rome, I was hoping to see him and that he gets better. But unfortunately, this is not doing well. But we wish the best and we hope he gets there soon.
You know, when a pope is hospitalized, you also, tend to get kind of off-the-record comments from cardinals or bishops or Vatican higher-ups. But really, nobody's saying much right now. They're all saying we're just praying for the Pope. And there was a mass today here in Rome at 5:30, focused on prayers for the Pope. So again, I think that stresses just how critical the situation is for Pope Francis right now.
CBC's Megan Williams in Vatican City. Now, Germany is set to have a new chancellor and a new government following today's historic general election that saw the far right make substantial gains. The center-right party, led by Friedrich Merz, claimed the victory with an unaccessible lead. Meanwhile, the far-right Alternative for Germany, or AfD, almost doubled its vote share and surged into second place. It was the strongest result for a far-right party since World War II, but AfD is likely to be frozen out of power as other parties are refusing to work with it. The incumbent center-left party of the current chancellor slumped into third place. On the eve of the third anniversary of Russia's large-scale invasion of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky says he plans to speak with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at tomorrow's virtual G7 meeting. And he says he expects to hear about Canada's recent relationship troubles with the United States.
The Prime Minister Trudeau will be here. He will be here tomorrow as the chair of the G7. And he will tell me in detail what's going on between them and the United States.
Zelensky says he will speak with the Prime Minister of Denmark as well. U.S. President Donald Trump is also threatening to take over Denmark's autonomous territory of Greenland. Children with Ukrainian backgrounds were in class in St. John's yesterday. The weekly Saturday classes started about a year ago. They offer children from families who came to Canada to escape the war the chance to reconnect with their culture, language, and heritage. And those are just some of the top stories we are tracking for you on CBC News Network. Ian Hanomansing is standing by with a special edition of Cross Country Checkup. 51st State, a cross-border conversation will broadcast both here in Canada on CBC Radio and in the United States on NPR and C-SPAN. So Ian is going to be joined by NPR host Jeremy Hobson. And today's question is, what do you think of Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st state? You can share your thoughts by calling 1-888-416-8333, or you can send a message to cbc.ca/aircheck.
What I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state.
I'm Ian Hanomansing, the host of Cross Country Checkup in Canada.
There's not a snowball's chance in hell that Canada will ever be the 51st state.
And I'm Jeremy Hobson, the host of The Middle in the U.S.
Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada.
Live from Vancouver, this is a cross-border conversation.
You know something? To the president, I'll make him a counteroffer. How about if we buy Alaska and we'll throw in Minnesota and Minneapolis at the same time? So, you know, it's not realistic.
The U.S. and Canada have been longtime allies and neighbors.
But when U.S. President Donald Trump began musing and then doubling and tripling down on Canada as the 51st state, tensions pushed us to the brink of a trade war earlier this month.
Then Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told a group of business leaders on a hot mic that Donald Trump's 51st state comments are not a joke, but in fact a real thing.
And just last week, after a meeting with Canadian premiers, Deputy White House Chief of Staff James Blair cautioned them to take Donald Trump's comments about the 51st state, quote, at face value.
But while some see this as an attack on Canadian sovereignty, others believe the president is trolling and seeking negotiation leverage for the next round of trade talks. So it's now time to have your say.
Our question today, what do you think of Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st state? Our number is 1-888-416-8333. 1-888-416-8333.
Canada as a whole would probably be better. Alberta definitely would be better as a state versus a province.
I don't understand why Trump has to keep saying, oh, the 51st state. I'm telling you, I will never wear red, white, and blue.
We're taking calls from both sides of the border across Canada and the United States, from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, Minnesota to Florida.
We are already getting a huge volume of calls, and if those of you in the United States are having a hard time getting through on the phone, you can go online to cbc.ca/aircheck. So that's cbc.ca/aircheck and leave a message, and we will call you back. And of course, you can also try our regular number, 1-888-416-8333, 1-888-416-8333.
It's an insult to Canadians to think that they're so small that they would become a state of the U.S.
I think we should do it because, man, it will help to increase add to the economy and everything else. It will strengthen us.
Our question this hour, what do you think of Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st state?
And let me give you that online address one more time, cbc.ca/aircheck.
But why are we supporting a country, $200 billion plus a year? Our military is at their disposal. They should be a state. That's why I told Trudeau when he came down, I said, what would happen if we didn't do it? He said Canada would dissolve. Canada wouldn't be able to function.
I'm Jeremy Hobson.
And I'm Ian Hanomansing, across Canada on CBC Radio and CBC News Network.
And across America on public radio stations and C-SPAN Television.
This is a live cross-border conversation, a co-production between CBC and The Middle.
And for anyone who wants to watch us live on TikTok or YouTube, you can find us at CBC News. And Ian, before we get into this, it is worth noting a lot of people are angry that we are even having this conversation. They think it's an endorsement of Trump's suggestion and an insult. You have been on the receiving end of a lot of this.
You know, we have received a lot of online comments, emails on some sensitive topics in the past, but nothing like I've seen over the last 48 hours. And I should point out that there's no question that the original show question that we had struck a nerve. And so it was never our intent to normalize the idea that Canada would ever become the 51st state. And so, you know, when people tell us that just doing this show is normalizing Trump's comments and that it's dangerous, I should tell you that we are very careful about how we do a program like this. We are not in any way endorsing what Trump has been saying. Many of you in Canada spoke out. We listened. And as I mentioned, we changed the show question to better reflect our aim here. And, you know, the whole point of our show and The Middle is to hear what those of you who are listening and watching have to think. This is a place where people can speak out on issues where politicians up until now have been doing most of the talking. I really think it's important for Americans to hear what Canadians have to say. And Jeremy, I'm really interested in hearing what Americans have to say.
Absolutely. And Americans may not know this because we've got a lot going on in the United States right now, but Canadians have actually been boycotting American products because of this, have been canceling travel because of the tensions between the two countries. But as I said, you know, right now, Americans are focused on, since Trump took office, he has said he wants to take over Greenland, the Panama Canal, Gaza. He wants the mineral rights in Ukraine, not to mention the thousands of federal workers being laid off indiscriminately or just being told that they've got to tell the government 5 things they did last week or be fired, and egg prices in the United States through the roof. By the way, egg prices here, not bad.
No,
like
you can.
I should bring some back with me.
If it's legal, sure.
Okay, that said, there is no more important relationship than the one between the U.S. and Canada, and we do want to hear from people on both sides of the border today. And we will start this hour by saying that some of what Trump says ends up happening. Some of it is bluster. So let's bring in someone who may be able to help decipher all of that for us. Mara Eliason is the national political correspondent for NPR. She's in Washington, D.C. Mara, great to have you with us. Do you think Trump is being serious when he talks about Canada as the 51st state? Is he trolling Justin Trudeau? Is it a negotiating tactic? What?
I think it's all of those things. Every Trump troll is a trial balloon. And, you know, there's so many things he says, threatens, then he backs off. At the time he says it, he probably means it completely seriously. I think you should take him seriously and literally. I do think that even though it's hard to make predictions, especially about the future, Canada will not become the 51st state of the United States. And although it's clearly a huge topic of conversation and consternation in Canada, it is not as if Trump put any kind of thing in motion in the United States. There's no congressional resolutions to say we're inviting Canada to join us. There's no effort on the Trump administration's part to get a referendum in Canada scheduled on this. Nothing at all. It was an epic troll, and it was meant to dominate and humiliate Justin Trudeau. And that's why he continues to call him Governor Trudeau. And the irony is that Trudeau could have turned around and said, hey, beware of what you wish for. We have more population than California. We'd have more electoral votes than any state. And we'd vote blue, and a Republican would never win the White House if we were the 51st state.
Well, and from a Senate perspective, if they were playing by Wyoming rules, they would have 60 states and 120 senators in the U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
So by the
That's
population,
not how it works. The
No.
Senate is a minoritarian institution, but they'd have a lot of House members.
Well, but many
people...
people...
that's based on population.
Well,
yeah.
and many people, Mara, are taking it seriously in Canada. Canadian
As
elected
they should.
officials...
It's an incredible insult. Yeah.
Well, listen here to the Premier Andrew Furey from Newfoundland and Labrador spoke to the CBC after meeting at the White House, and here's what he had to say.
Unfortunately, in the meeting at the White House, the officials confirmed that he is very serious about the 51st state comments. He's said it, to my count, 5 or 6 times now. So he's not only doubling down, he's now taking a joke that was once a social post and turning it into sustained rhetoric and a sustained attack on Canada. I believe the tariff issue is perhaps just conflation. I do believe that this president in particular has an imperialistic agenda, one of expansion, and we need to take that as Canadians very seriously. We need to take that as a not just as an economic threat, but as a threat on our sovereignty, on our Canadian values, and our Canadian identity.
Mara, we think back to the first Trump term and some of the things that he said that were pretty outlandish, like a Muslim ban did happen, or like the separation of children from their families when they crossed illegally did happen. So,
well, those things are within the president's control. I mean, he controls immigration. It's quite a different thing to say that he can wave a magic wand and create Canada as a 51st state. I mean, now don't forget, he also floated we're going to take over Gaza. We're going to own it. We're going to hold it. Well, guess what? He's backed off from that because the Arab nations said, forget it. We're not participating in the forced expulsion of Palestinians from their land. So he does back off. Look what happened when he floated the latest tariffs. The market reacted, pulled him back for very, very little concessions. You know, what Canada and Mexico did was nothing really. But so he often talks more than he does. But I think that the Canadian politician you just played, he is imperialist, he is expansionist, he believes in manifest destiny, and he has talked about he hasn't ruled out using military force to take over Greenland or the Panama Canal. He hasn't said he would use military force to take over Canada.
Well, and you've got a giggle in your voice there, and there is something like, is this a joke or not? But at the same time,
I don't think it's a joke.
Well,
I don't think
at what cost? Also, is it at what cost to our relationship with Canada?
Huge cost. First of all, don't forget, Donald Trump has been very, very busy dismantling the administrative state in the United States and putting a stake through the heart of NATO, which of course Canada is our number one important ally and in NATO. And he just, you know, so far the 51st state idea hasn't gone beyond a Trump troll. But to just mention it at all will diminish goodwill on the part of Canada towards America. You see Canadians booing Americans at a hockey game.
Right.
And, you know, Donald Trump doesn't believe in allies. He believes that we are a big, powerful superpower. And if you're a smaller country or in any way dependent on our largesse or our nuclear shield, whatever, then you have to do what he wants you to do. That's not how the world works. I think you're going to see a tremendous wave of anti-American sentiment in Europe and in Canada.
That's Mara
I don't know what the polls show there.
Yeah. Mara, thank you very much. Mara Eliason, national political correspondent for NPR. Again, our question is, what do you think of Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st state? Our number, 888-416-8333.
We have a lot of things to juggle here, Jeremy, because we've got two different television networks, two networks of radio stations. We have lots of calls, but we have to take a break in just a moment for the NPR stations. And before we get there, let me read an online comment from Rob McKinnon in Calgary, Alberta. He went to cbc.ca/aircheck, which I recommend to everybody, especially our U.S. listeners, if you want to make sure we hear your voice and know you want to be on the program. Rob says, should Canada become the 51st state, it would encompass the largest geographical area, be the most populated, most resource-rich, and potentially the most affluent state in the U.S. With the commensurate number of seats in the House of Representatives, it could exert more influence on U.S. national policy than any other state. In short, it would become a mega state that the president would have to treat with respect. We are going to go to calls in just a moment after that break for NPR, but a reminder for those of you who are just tuning in Canada and the United States, the program is a cross-border conversation. You can listen live, actually, on the CBC Listen app or watch at CBCNews.ca. Our question on this program, what do you think of Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st state? Our number, 888-416-8333. I'm looking at the queue of calls, lots coming in. The next caller we're going to hear is from Victoria, British Columbia. But before we get to that call, let's take a look at more of the online reaction. Kathleen Coyne responded on Blue Sky. And Kathleen says, Ian, I respect you and deeply value the CBC, but what you're hearing, and she's referring to the many, literally hundreds of posts on Blue Sky and on Threads and on X, what you're hearing is the deep and real fear and anger of Canadians. The possibility of being taken over by the U.S. is traumatizing. You need to be compassionate, to listen and take a trauma-informed approach, change the question, or cancel the program. And of course, we did change the question on Saturday morning after we saw the online comments, because our original feeling was the first question might have been misinterpreted by people. In terms of canceling the program, we do think obviously that it's really important to have this conversation on both sides of the border. So we are having the program, and I hope you find it interesting.
I'm Jeremy Hobson, along with Ian Hanomansing, coming to you live from beautiful Vancouver. We want to hear from you about your thoughts about President Trump's comments that Canada should be the 51st U.S. state. We're taking calls from both the United States and Canada at 888-416-8333. That's 888-416-8333. We are going to go to our first call, and that is Liz Moore, who's in Victoria, British Columbia. Liz Moore, welcome to the program. I want to hear from you. You've lived in Canada all your life. What do Trump's comments mean to you?
Well, I have to say that I was born Canadian in 1961, and I always imagined that I was going to die a Canadian, and I still will. So in that respect, I'm going to stand, strong for Canada. I think we have to take a look at just, past and the present now. I mean, you look at Germany and Austria, they decided they wanted it, they took it. You take a look at Ukraine, Russia decided they wanted it. They're attempting to take it. And we're, in my opinion, in the same position. So I think as Canadians, we have to ask ourselves, what does Canada mean to us? I mean, the maple leaf is on my passport. The maple leaf is on my flag. And it means a lot to me. It means everything to me. It's my country. So
but you think, Liz, that Trump would actually take Canada by force?
Absolutely. I have no doubt in my mind. I really don't. And I think Canadians have to prepare for that reality. And I want to say about the United States. I run a company that, I have a lot of agents that are, U.S.-based agents. My company embraces U.S. clients. This is really a kind of a travesty to even have to think or ponder the fact that we may not become the allies we always have been. They've always, in my opinion, been our strongest ally. Mm-hmm. They've always, in my opinion, been our protector. They're who I look at when we face, World War III threats. I think of the United States and thank God they're on our side. They've always got our back. So this is really unfathomable to me that things could, flip on a dime and we can be in this reality that we're no longer Canada.
Liz, thank you so much for that. And you hear the emotion there, and I think we're going to hear a lot of that because for many people, just the idea of talking about this, that your closest friend would say, we're going to take you over, or we want you to be the 51st state, whether you like it or not, it obviously has drawn a lot of anger from many people on both sides of the border. I bet we're going to hear from a lot of Americans who feel the exact same way. Yeah, and let's listen to an American right now. Paul Ippolito is in Rochester, New York. Hi, Paul.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call. And if I could just jump right in, sure. This is deeply, deeply saddening to me to hear this conversation. And we've got the biggest buffoon in the world as our buffoon in chief, and he's doing his usual, like you say, his usual trolling and clowning people and. Just to see it just pains me to see, Canadians hurt by this and the reactions from everybody on both sides, starting with the hockey game and certainly starting with stuff before that. And, these petty, we're not going to sell American liquor. We're not going to, bring Canadian this and that. It's just so sad because my quick background, I was born and raised in Buffalo. Which I always, to me, that was the 11th province, living in Buffalo, being so close. I grew up within, the viewing distance of the Peace Bridge. I learned how to play hockey in Fort Erie. My family stayed at a place called Crescent Beach, Ontario, summers. Yeah. I fell in love with Canada, and this just, like I say, this is painful to see. And I'm just sorry that. It ever had to happen to even get to this point and this far.
Paul, so many calls that we want to get to, but let me quickly ask you a follow-up question. Among your friends in Rochester, New York, do any of them even know that this is going on? Do they talk about it?
You know, to be honest with you, I haven't heard that much talk about it. I'm sure if I was back in Buffalo, I have a feeling that would be a much different conversation. Is what, you know, being that close, you know, like I say, looking across the river and knowing what's going on. I will be honest. Yeah, I don't hear that much about it in Rochester.
All right. Well, interesting to hear all of your perspective. Paul, thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
Let's just sneak one more call in here before we go to our next guest. Mark Raymond is calling from Detroit, also right there on the border with Canada. Mark, what do you think about Trump's comments on the U.S., on Canada becoming the 51st state?
It was not a comfortable information to download. I'm 46 years old. I've always been American, but I've always been fond of our Canadian relatives. And I mean that as us as Americans and Canadians, we're very much the same in a lot of respects, but we have our borders and we have our fundamentals. And it's hard for me to talk about.
Well, let me ask you this, Mark. Do you take it seriously? Do you think that it's for real, or do you think it's a negotiating tactic of some kind?
Actually, I think it's more of a. It is. I don't think it was ever going to happen. I think it was more of a psychological thing to use against both sides. But I'll tell you right where it rattled me was for several years in the back of my mind, I've always kept the idea that if I got too fed up with the way our country was, that I could also possibly just move to Canada. I'm an outdoorsman. I have a lot of, I spend most of my time outdoors, so I could very comfortably assimilate to a Canadian lifestyle. And the threat it hit directly to my I'm hard to excite.
Yeah,
I'm usually a pretty calm person.
But may decide that you want to move to Canada. Mark, thank you very much for that call.
Let's bring in a really interesting voice, familiar to Canadians, and I'll explain to those of you in the United States who she is. Arlene Dickinson is a Canadian businesswoman, an investor on a program called Dragon's Den. That's the Canadian version of the U.S. TV show Shark Tank, though Dragon's Den was on television first. Also a member of a Canadian Advisory Council on Canada-U.S. relations. And a few weeks ago, she was in the room during Prime Minister Trudeau's hot mic moment when he described Trump's 51st state threat as a real thing and didn't realize that the microphone was carrying that to the media. And we've reached her in Toronto. Hi, Arlene.
Hey, Ian. How are you?
Good. Well, let me ask you a question we've asked some of the callers. How realistically do you take Donald Trump's 51st state threats?
I think about it in two ways. I think about, you've been talking, and some of your callers have been talking about whether or not this is just a negotiating tactic. And you have to ask yourself, a negotiating tactic for what exactly? And so, an economic war can be debilitating to a nation. And so it's not, to me, about, military power coming in and trying to claim Canada. It's about trying to claim our resources and our geography in order to help protect the United States. And so I think it is a real threat in terms of wanting to make sure that the power and the resources go to the United States. And to do that, they need to harm Canada in the process. I will say also, the second part is that people don't do these things. This isn't the Americans or this isn't Canadians. This is a government. This is a leader in President Trump who is making decisions that will impact Americans and Canadians equally and have a large amount of hurt on their wallets and their way of life in order to gain political power.
Arlene, shortly after taking office, and we're talking less than 2 months ago, Donald Trump said he would use economic force to eliminate the artificially drawn border, his words, not mine, between Canada and the United States. So let's talk about the tariff threat. How is that a threat to Canadian sovereignty?
Well, if we don't control our economy, if we don't control our resources and everything to do with our own economy, then we end up not having a sovereignty. What do we have? What do we have control of? We don't have control over the power of our trade and everything that comes with it. So, ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to protect our resources. We need to protect our land. We need to protect the power that we have. And we have great power. I think Canadians realize that, our resources, our minerals, our manufacturing and our goods are very worthwhile and very much necessary in the global scheme of things. So this isn't just about what America wants. This is about what the world needs. And Canada has that. And so holding on to that and remembering that is really what's going to protect our sovereignty.
You know Kevin O'Leary. He was with you on Dragon's Den at the beginning of that program, currently a Canadian investor on Shark Tank. And he was an early proponent of an economic union. And he also joined Alberta's premier at Mar-a-Lago to meet with Donald Trump. So Kevin is promoting an economic union between Canada and the United States. He talks about a common currency. We're going to hear from him later, but I'd like to give you the first word on that, an economic union. Do you think that would lead to greater prosperity for both countries?
No. I think an economic union in this case, where somebody has so much more size and girth than what we do, basically means handing over our economic future to another nation. So this isn't a union. A union implies that, you have two parties coming together on equal footing. That's not the case here. So what we have is a country that if we did unite with them and, shared a dollar, we would be giving up everything, as I said earlier, in terms of our economic capabilities and our future. I don't think so.
One last thing, Arlene, and sorry for jumping in there. We've got a lot of Americans who are watching and listening to this program live right now. What message do you have for them?
We have for decades shared the largest border and trading relationship in the world that has been a free trading relationship that has benefited both sides. The narrative that there's any subsidy or any sort of benefit to Canadians through this is false. I would ask you to just read the stats, understand what's being said, and know that we value you as friends and neighbors. Americans are not our enemies. We want to end this in a peaceful way and negotiate as much as we can so that we can have a fair and equal trading relationship into the future. And I hope that Canadians and Americans can have influence on their governments to have them listen to the impact that this is going to have on all of us collectively.
Arlene, always nice talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks, Ian.
Arlene Dickinson, a Canadian business person, also an investor on the TV program Dragon's Den, and a member of Canada's Advisory Council on Canada-U.S. relations, and she is in Toronto this afternoon. Coming up, we'll speak to writer David Frum from The Atlantic, a Canadian and American, about what Trump's 51st state rhetoric means for the state of democracy around the world. And of course, we would love to hear from you. Our number is 888-416-8333. That number, once again, 888-416-8333.
And Ian, just to back up what Arlene was saying, if you look at the numbers of the trade cross-border, especially when you look at something like cars, automobiles, it's almost equal imports to exports between the two countries. And a lot of cars, a lot of the parts are made on one side, they're sold on the other, but the benefit in many areas of the economy is pretty equal. Let's get back to the phones. And Rain Girton, who's calling from Vancouver, where we're broadcasting from. Rain, welcome, and go ahead with your thoughts.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be on the show. I personally think it's highly concerning and reprehensible that Trump would dare to suggest this, let alone continue to drill this notion. But beyond that, though, it's concerning that practically no one else is coming to stand up for us. I mean, one of the truly special and unique aspects of Canada is that we're part of the Commonwealth, which is like a group with shared values. And what I really want to see is Keir Starmer make a move. This would be highly significant because in all that's happened in recent weeks, it seems that surprisingly, Mr. Starmer is someone that Trump has a level of respect for. And I'm really curious as to what the threshold is for other leaders to strongly come out in support of Canada. I mean, haven't we learned from World War II about the dangers of inaction and the dangers of appeasement?
So you think that the British Prime Minister coming in would make a difference here with Donald Trump?
I genuinely think it would, because he's another really strong global leader, and a leader whom Trump seems to actually care about the opinion of, because Trump is willing to negotiate with him about tariffs much faster than he was with Trudeau, and much more willing to make concessions with the UK. He almost seems to have a level of respect, which I think is really interesting. And for someone with that attention from Trump to say something, I think could have positive impact.
Rain, you're a high school student?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, and I think we have the permission of your parent for you to be on. You're 17 years old, but something I'm really curious about. I've asked other callers this question. I'll ask you. In high school in Vancouver, is Trump, and particular the 51st state comments or threat, depending on your perspective, is that something your friends talk about?
Absolutely. I mean, I even have friends in the United States who are talking to me about this and saying that they're getting annoyed about this. But here in Vancouver, my friends and I just, every time we see another news story, we roll our eyes and say, you've got to be kidding me. Isn't he taking this far enough?
Rain, thank you very much. It's interesting to talk about the news stories, because I will tell you, on the U.S. side of the border, this is not one of our top 5 things right now that we're talking about, because there are so many other things since Trump came in. Let's get one more call in before a short break for our U.S. stations. Margaret is in Cleveland, Ohio. Margaret, what do you think about this? Do you take it seriously?
Thank you for having me on the show. I never do this, so. Say from the United States, more than 50% of us are kind of being held hostage at this point. This is how we feel every day. Something else that is reputable that we don't support, that we don't agree with, is this quote unquote on our behalf. And he does not represent me. He does not represent most of the people I know. So when he says things like this, I would say do take him serious.
Well, and Margaret, and your line's breaking up a little bit, but I do want to ask you one quick follow-up. If you were to talk to if you were to look across the lake and your Canadian friends on the other side could hear you, what would be your one message to them right now?
It may be bad to be our neighbor right now, but imagine U.S. citizen.
Imagine being a U.S. citizen. Okay. Okay.
Please give us some.
Yeah.
It's sort of like when someone else's crazy uncle, right? You don't want to be around them, but you feel bad for the relative.
Yeah.
So
that's what you would say. Margaret, thank you very much for that call. Ian, interesting to hear that so far we're hearing a common theme here on both sides of the border.
Yeah, and she talks about, in her words, the crazy uncle metaphor. When I was talking to a host on C-SPAN in the United States earlier, and we're being broadcast on C-SPAN right now, I used the analogy of Thanksgiving, whether it's October Thanksgiving in Canada or November in the United States. But, you have this family gathering, and then people start saying things, they get angry, and then somebody says something that crosses the line, and you wonder, are you ever going to be able to walk that back? And I wonder if some of the rhetoric that's happening here will get us to a point where it's going to be very, very difficult to walk things back.
Well, and we're already seeing also in sporting events, there was, of course, the big hockey game that Canada won. Congratulations. But also, I saw there was just one in Philadelphia where the American national anthem was booed, but then even the Americans were cheering the Canadian national anthem.
In Philadelphia?
Yes, probably just as a sign of we're sorry that this is happening right now. If you're just tuning in, we are live from Vancouver. You're listening to a cross-border conversation across Canada on CBC News Network and across the United States on NPR stations and on C-SPAN Television. You can reach out at 888-416-8333. That is 888-416-8333, or you can go to cbc.ca/aircheck. And let's check in on social media. A lot coming in online as well. This is from TikTok, Ian. Dusta, Hutz Eisenman writes, as a Californian, we would rather be part of Canada. Lisa says this is not up to Trump, and even if Canada would consider this, which they never will, it certainly won't happen ever if Trump is president. Morgan on TikTok writes, I would prefer to become a new province. That's something we've heard a few times. Julia on TikTok writes, idiocracy at its finest. Canada will never be annexed. Ania writes, we can't take care of the people in this country as it is. She's talking about the United States. And as for Trump's information, Canadians are largely liberal, so the Republican Party would take a big hit if this happened. And one more, John in Milwaukee emailed and said, Canada is a sovereign nation. The United States must not act as a colonial power to anyone. Canada remains part of the British Commonwealth and must be respected. Okay.
A cross-border conversation. I'm Ian Hanomansing from CBC's Cross Country Checkup.
And many Canadians may have been caught by surprise when Trump started referring to Canada as the 51st state. But for those who have been watching Trump closely, the way he speaks about Canada is just one piece of his foreign policy perspective. David Frum, staff writer at The Atlantic. His latest book is called Trumpocalypse, Restoring American Democracy. He was also a speechwriter for former President George W. Bush and has Canadian roots. We've reached him in Vienna, Austria. David, welcome.
Thank you so much.
David, it's Ian Hanomansing here. What do you think of Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st state?
Well, they're obviously intended to offend, to provoke. That's what so many of his comments are intended to do. But let's take it seriously for a moment. The story of the modern world, and as you said, I'm speaking to you from Austria, that felt very hard, the hand of the modern world, has been that societies, democratic societies, can cooperate across borders, retaining their own sovereignty and cooperating in all kinds of creative ways, for everything from law enforcement, national story of the Canadian relationship.
You know, David, I'm going to jump in there. I'm sorry to do this, but we're having some problems with our internet connection, and I'd like us to take another shot at disconnecting from you and reconnecting, and hopefully we can get a better connection rather than have the audio problems we have. So let's take a little bit of a break while we do that. And Jeremy, why don't you take another call?
Let's go to a call who is Bill, who is in Burton, British Columbia. Bill, welcome. And what do you make of the 51st state comments from Trump?
Well, actually not very much of it. And thank you both for having me on the show. I think it's great. Kudos to both you, CBC and NPR, for doing this. I think it's a conversation that should be had. Not from Burton. Burton got sunk about 40 years ago under the High Arrow Dam. I am from Vernon, British Columbia, and I do think it is a dreadful mistake, but for reasons that really haven't been brought up until now. And that is that we share a long distinguished history in North America. In fact, maybe not that distinguished, taking into consideration some of our First Nations people. But the American experience in North America has been very, very much different than the Canadian one. And we have different values that drive us. I mean, the Americans would seem to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have peace, order, and good government. Our country was influenced on the East more by the British experience and by our experience with the French that were originally here and are forming together of a nation in the East that's extended from coast to coast to coast. And consequently, ethnically, we're a whole lot different. We might look the same, but we're a lot different. We have a single-pay healthcare system.
Right.
Most of us would never give up on. And I'm not, by the way, I'm not a prohibitionist when it comes to firearms, but I have to let you know that we don't have near the intensity of firearms or other types of violence that exist down in the States. In short, we're just, we're very, very much different. Now, is that a bad point? Not at all in the least. I mean, we are capable with different perspectives of forming an alliance with our Mexican brethren and sisterin to do great things for the world.
Yeah, I think we've got it there. They're different cultures. Thank you for that call, Ian. I think we could say we say sorry and you say sorry. So it's like tomato, tomato. Go ahead.
Do you say sorry as often as we do, though?
No, probably not.
Let's try David Frum again, staff writer at The Atlantic. He is in Vienna, Austria. So, David, I know you've stayed up really late to take part in the program. I have my fingers crossed that our internet connection is a little bit better than it was a moment ago. And let me re-ask you the first question from before, because the audio wasn't so good. What do you make of Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st state?
Well, I hope I am more audible. The story of the post-war world since 1945 has been that democratic countries have discovered ways to cooperate ever more intimately on everything from law enforcement to environmental protection to national security, while retaining independent sovereignty. So we have, in the democratic world, more countries than ever, and more cooperation than ever. So Trump's ideas, I mean, they're meant as a troll, they're meant to offend, they're meant to provoke. They're also primitive and false, because the level, before he became president, the level of cooperation between the United States and Canada was so intimate in so many ways. So what is the problem that he's trying to solve? And if he thinks that by annexing Canada, you get access to resources for free, well, again, that's primitive. It's still a capitalist economy. You still have to, if you want zinc from Canada, it still has to be paid for. If you want nickel from Canada, it still has to be paid for. You're not just going to steal it. You wouldn't steal it from Americans. And one last thing. If Trump did annex Canada and said, okay, now you're a 51st state and we're going to trade with you freely and we won't have any tariffs. If the tariffs are a bad idea if Canada is a 51st state, how do the tariffs become a good idea when Canada is not a 51st state?
Yeah. So Canadian political leaders have unanimously, soundly rejected what Donald Trump is saying. In fact, he's done an unwitting job of uniting Canadian political leaders, left, right, and centrist. Polls show that the vast majority of Canadians don't like the notion. They don't even like to talk about it. And even in the United States, a poll from Angus Reid suggests it isn't popular there either. You know a little bit about the political world as a former speechwriter for President George W. Bush. Given that lack of popularity, given that lack of traction in Canada, why does Trump keep repeating these words?
Well, because this is not just about Canada. One of Donald Trump's serious priorities in the second presidency is to break up the American-led alliance system everywhere. He sent his vice president to Munich a week ago to give a speech endorsing the far-right Alternative for Germany party, which just failed to win the election, alienating Germans. He started a trade war with Colombia, a country that signed a free trade agreement with the United States in 2012. Trump's vision is of an America isolated. Therefore, he imagines that will somehow make America more powerful. In fact, it will make America more weak. At every turn, he serves the interests of democracy's enemies. The democratic system depends on alliances and cooperation and trade between all the many democratic countries. And Donald Trump seems to think that it's his job to wreck that system. And the only winners are the world's dictatorships, especially Russia, especially China.
One last question for you, David. As a student, as an observer, as a veteran of politics, what do you think Canada should do as Trump just keeps using this rhetoric over and over again?
Well, what Canada should do and what Canada has to do are very different. Canada is preparing methods of retaliation. But this is how relationships go bad. That anyone who's been in any kind of intimate partnership knows the moment you start thinking, how do I pay this back? How do I hurt you as much as you've hurt me? The relationship is heading to a breakup altogether. And what we need is an intervention where somebody needs to say to this couple, you need to stop thinking about how you hurt each other and start remembering why you need to help each other.
But who does that?
I hope it will be the American elected in their good time saying to this maniac, knock it off.
David, always nice having you on the program, and I do appreciate you staying up so late in Vienna. Thank you very much for joining us.
Bye-bye.
David Frum, staff writer for The Atlantic. Our question today on Cross Country Checkup and The Middle on Canadian and American radio and television. What do you think of Trump's threats about Canada becoming the 51st state? Call us at 1-888-416-8333.
And by the way, if you are an American who believes this is a good idea, we're open to your comments as well. If you're a Canadian who thinks that you want to be part of the United States, that would be an interesting perspective to hear as well. We're open to all on this program at 888-416-8333. And let's go to another call. Linda Boudreau is with us from New Orleans, Louisiana. Linda, go ahead with your thoughts about Trump's comments.
Yes, every time I hear on the news, they talk about, Trump wanting Canada to be a state, I laugh. I just spontaneously laugh. And the reason is when Trump ran in 2016, I was hesitant to vote for him. I didn't know how he would handle international politics, and a local business owner convinced me that it was probably better to vote for him than a third-party candidate, which I've done twice in elections because I didn't like the Republican candidate, because he would get, constitutional judges on the Supreme Court. And so I voted for him. And after that, I get up every day. Let's see what Trump did today, put on the news. And he would say some outrageous things, sometimes insulting people. And I would kind of cringe. I'd think, oh, why does he have to do that? But I liked everything that he implemented, policy-wise. And then the thing happened with the North Korean president where he said, I have bigger bombs than you do. And I went, oh, my God, And then I saw how that worked out. And also I read that shortly, a couple months after all that took place, that the North Korean president had called up China and was asking them, does he mean it? And that was when I got it. I said, oh, I see what he was doing. I have found that he never does anything off the cuff without thinking it through. And
do you think that he's thought this through with threatening Canada like this?
Yeah, but I just don't know how people can take it as a serious threat. And then as I'm starting to hear now the last day or two about how Canadians are really upset, I'm thinking, well, I can understand why they would be and why they would feel threatened. And it's hard for me as an American who, a citizen of the United States all my life and haven't lived in other countries to, I keep lately, realizing how powerful the United States is.
That's interesting.
And the whole, and then, we like slant the whole world. Yeah. And I want to see Canadians and Europeans return to freedom. And I pray for them. When the trucker thing went on in Canada, the lockdowns and stuff, the same thing was in Australia too. These are our Western allies, and I thought, we do share a lot in common, culture-wise. And I know there are differences, but it bothers me. I want to, and I think Trump wants that too.
Okay, and then Linda, I think we've got it there. But thank you very much for that. Very interesting. A Trump voter who says, by the way, I would say Canadians would probably be saying to Linda, well, we do have freedom right now, but still an interesting perspective.
Yeah, also interesting, her last name, Boudreau. There are a lot of, she pronounces it slightly different, Boudreau, I think, but there are a lot of Canadians, especially in the eastern half of Canada, who either have that last name or recognize that last name, and she probably is from one of those Cajun families.
Oh, in New Orleans, you spell go, G-E-A-U-X, okay, so yes.
But I'm just saying, her family roots are probably in Quebec French, or the Maritimes. Yep. And let's go to William Fung now, who's in Vancouver. And William, your family roots are in Hong Kong, but you live in Canada now.
Hello, good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is William.
Hi.
And yes, my family originated from Hong Kong, but we immigrated almost 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents were from, I just want to, how should we say, give a bit of family background before I go venture forward with my answer.
Sure.
So my late parents, they were both they have both lived under Japanese occupation during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
So they know how it feels like to have the property, way of life, and even life being threatened and trampled, similar to what happened in Hong Kong a few years ago, as well as the Ukraine right now.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, we considered, during the early 1980s, when the British and the Chinese were negotiating the handover of Hong Kong without any participation or even representation from the Hong Kong populace. At that time, when they looked at other British Commonwealth countries as well as the United States too, and we finally chose Canada because of the inclusiveness and the multiculturalism, as well as almost no gun violence at that time. And even though they have both passed on, I also concur with their choice and their view. So, but if, as today's question of Canada possibly being coerced, annexed to become the 51st state of the United States, as said earlier, because we chose Canada because of these particular viewpoints, we are afraid that the Canada would not become the desirable habitat that we have so far enjoyed.
Yeah, William, do you I know there are a lot of Canadians who really don't think this would ever come to pass. Do you feel like the threat from Donald Trump could ever actually happen?
I think this person, because he and his team have long thought of things. That's how the reason why they can roll out all these executive orders and everything so fast.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they just wake up one day and just think, oh, I need to do this. So I think they have something behind them. And because Mr. Trump is on his second and last term, I believe that he really wants to leave the legacy of being the greatest American president ever.
Mm-hmm.
So if he can annex Canada, that would really help his legacy.
You know, it's particularly interesting given your family history and what you've seen in Hong Kong and China, that it kind of informs your view of what you worry about here, William. Thank you very much for calling.
Thank you.
This is the great thing about a call-in show. No algorithms here just amplifying the loudest voices or the angriest voices. You're reaching so many people, and you never know who's going to call in and what their background is going to be. I'm going to sneak in one more here before we take a quick break. John in Detroit. John, just 30 seconds here, but what are your thoughts about this?
So I've lived on the border of Canada for almost 60 years, and I actually heard about the news on CBC Radio and was appalled, and I apologize. But this is the USA, and this is what we are. We are an exploited people who came in here and exploited people that were here for 10,000 years, stealing people from their land an ocean's way away and enslaved them, and we still enslave them.
John, let me ask you, are you noticing in Detroit fewer Canadians coming through? Because I've heard in Bellingham, Washington, for example, across the border, they're already seeing a big drop in Canadian visitors.
They're pulling out of events in Detroit, and they're ending ferry service over here for their senior citizens to come over here, and they're going to stay over there and spend their money.
Wow. John Myers calling from Detroit, Michigan. Thank you very much for that call. Ian, so interesting to hear from people on both sides of the border. Again, our number is 888-416-8333. That is 888-416-8333. Some of the U.S. stations are going to be breaking away in a moment, but of course you can always reach us online at cbc.ca/aircheck. We were worried that the Canadian callers, very exercised about this, were going to jam up the phone lines, but as we've been able to hear so far, we've been able to hear from some Americans as well.
And we've heard a lot of people, at least 2, if not 3 callers from Michigan. Not too surprising. When you and I did a cross-border conversation about a month, I guess, before the U.S. election, we were hosted by WDET station in Detroit. Yeah, they were fantastic, and I don't doubt that there are probably a lot of people listening to this program from WDET. And what are some of the other stations?
All across the country, WAMU in Washington, Minnesota Public Radio, LAist in Los Angeles. I'm just going to say right now, I'm Jeremy Hobson from The Middle, which is available as a podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm here with Ian Hanomansing of CBC's Cross Country Checkup, and you are listening to a special live cross-border conversation.
A lot of things we're juggling here on the program. We're taking a break now for NPR listeners for a minute. And while we do that, for those of you on CBC News Network and listening on CBC Radio, a couple of reactions we're getting at cbc.ca/aircheck. Dave Masters is in Michigan and says, as a Canadian living in the U.S. at present, this idea of Canada becoming the 51st state is offensive. Americans have a very limited view of anything outside of their country. They blindly follow the rhetoric, left or right. I've yet to find an American who doesn't want it all. Explaining issues on anything to them doesn't make them alter their opinion. Facts don't seem to matter. Ethan Wu from Scarborough, Ontario, says, to me, the idea of Canada as the 51st state feels a bit strange. Canada is a country with its own identity, rich history, and distinct culture. While we share a lot with the U.S., the idea of becoming a state would mean we would lose our unique Canadian sense of self. Welcome back to a cross-border conversation as we look at this issue.
Well, in the lead up to our show, we sent producer Brendan Condritz out in Chicago to get answers to our show's question. Here are some of the takes he got from the Windy City.
It's ridiculous. My wife is Canadian, and it's an insult to Canadians to think that they're so small that they would become a state of the U.S. and by themselves they're a separate country, and actually they're, right now, I think, a better country than we are.
What Canadian wants to be American? It seems ridiculous to me. Their healthcare system, their education system, everything there seems better than here.
I think we should do it because, man, it will help to increase the add to the economy and everything else. It will strengthen us. And this is long overdue. It should have been. Every move that Trump is making is the right move.
It's outrageous. Canada is its own country, and they're good friends of ours. I think it's an insult to the autonomy and integrity of another nation.
1-888-416-8333 is how you can take part in our cross-border call-in show here, or go to cbc.ca/aircheck. And Devin Carlos is in Kitchener, Ontario. Hi, Devin.
Hello, how are you?
Good. What would it mean for you if this ever were to come to pass?
Well, I am a trans woman, and I'm one of the people on Blue Sky who was quite a little amped that you were even talking about the idea of what the idea of a 51st state could mean. And many of the trans people I know in the States are terrified, and I'm terrified for them and for me. I would very likely have to flee the country.
And so, actually, let's back up for a second, because you mentioned Blue Sky, and I got a lot of posts directed towards me from people who were incensed that we would even do this show. Was that your feeling before the show went to air, that we shouldn't even have this conversation?
No, I understand why you're doing it. I feel like Americans need to hear this. I don't know how many Americans get to hear Canadian voices very often, and so this is an opportunity. That said, I belong to a community that is under threat, and I may not be representative of the rest of Canada. So please go on.
Yeah, I mean, and so when you hear Donald Trump say and say again and say yet again that Canada should become the 51st state, first of all, do you take it seriously?
Seriously, but not literally, yes. I consider it's the possibility of an abusive husband trying to alienate his partner from the rest of the world. Americans, we really care about you. You're our friends and have been for over a century. And it's only now that we've even had to consider the possibility. If Canada were to be annexed, I think it's very naive to think that we would be given political representation, that we would be a territory.
All right.
We would be taxed. What happened when the Americans were taxed with their representation?
Okay, Devin, thank you very much for calling, and I do appreciate hearing your voice and that you took the time to talk to us.
Thank you very much. Okay.
We've got another caller with us. Peter Knight is with us. Peter, where are you calling from, first of all, and your thoughts?
I'm calling from Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Kenosha, Wisconsin. Wonderful. Let us know. What do you think about Trump's comments about the U.S. Or Canada becoming a 51st state?
I'm a Canadian citizen still who's lived in the U.S. for 18 years. I'm married to an American, and frankly, it probably has improved my quality of life economically. So I can see some of the benefits in the longer term in a very carefully thought out economic agreement that could benefit both parties in terms of freer trade and opening up the markets with much more scope and capital for Canadians, if it's done the right way. But I think Canadians are doing the right thing, my fellow Canadians, in demonstrating their abhorrence by their actions and by their voices about this proposition from Trump. And I think they should continue doing that in showing our will and force and understanding how deep Canadian culture is. There is a threat that in the short period that Donald Trump will be able to do this, that there could be significant progress made towards this end. But he's, firing a lot of bullets, so to speak, everywhere. So, I don't know if this particular cat toy is going to keep his attention. But I think that I encourage my fellow Canadians to send the message that they're boycotting U.S. goods and to take this threat seriously, which they're doing.
Peter, we've got to run, but actually, just real quick, 5 seconds. Tell me, are people talking about this in Kenosha?
To some degree. I just retired from the University of Wisconsin system as professor. People are somewhat aware of. Yeah.
Peter, thank you very much for that call. Again, our number is 1-888-416-8333. That is 1-888-416-8333. If you can't get through on the phones, we have another way for you to get through, and that is by going to cbc.ca/aircheck. We would love to hear from you, whatever your view may be.
What I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state.
Hi, I'm Ian Hanomansing, the host of Cross Country Checkup in Canada.
There's not a snowball's chance in hell that Canada will ever be the 51st state.
And I'm Jeremy Hobson, the host of The Middle in the U.S.
Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada.
You're listening to Hour 2 of our cross-border conversation.
The U.S. and Canada have been longtime allies and neighbors.
But when U.S. President Donald Trump began musing and then doubling down on Canada as the 51st state, tensions and anxiety began to grow.
So right now we're taking calls from both sides of the border across Canada and the United States.
Our question, what do you think of Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st state?
I don't support Canada becoming the 51st state because I think I'm a more of a patriotic Canadian now than before.
I'm wondering if this goodwill between our countries actually ever did exist. Are we actually friends, or are we only there because what they can get from us?
We're live from Vancouver, Canada, taking calls from both sides of the U.S.-Canada border. Our number is 1-888-416-8333. That's 1-888-416-8333.
They're a separate country. I'm guessing they don't want to be the 51st state, so it's just insanity.
I've actually read online that some Canadians are in favor of it, so that was interesting to me, that they would like to be a 51st state because they're sick of commie Canada.
Wow. What do you think of that comment? What do you think of this issue? What do you think of Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st state?
Call us at 1-888-416-8333. Again, 1-888-416-8333.
I'm Ian Hanomansing.
And I'm Jeremy Hobson.
This is a cross-border conversation, a co-production between CBC and The Middle.
Ian, for listeners just joining us, I'll mention again, this is not an endorsement of the idea of Canada as a 51st state. A lot of people have written in to say we are normalizing Trump's statement, however outrageous it may be. I'll just note that the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, has said he thinks Trump is serious.
And call-in shows like ours, both the Middle and Cross Country Checkup, take on serious, sensitive topics that we think people are talking about and should have the opportunity to talk about on the air. Doesn't mean we're promoting it or both sidesing it. That's also something I saw online a lot. But learning about what people are thinking and why on both sides of the border and on many sides of the issue.
Well, and allowing Americans, by the way, to have a rare chance to hear from Canadians about what they think ordinary Canadians, and have ordinary Canadians have a chance to hear from ordinary Americans about what they think about this. The other thing I'll say, Ian, is that 8 years ago when Trump first came in to power, people didn't think he was serious about a Muslim ban. That happened. They didn't think he was serious about separating children from their families who came in illegally. That happened. So it is our job as journalists to talk about this. And the real upside is, of course, that we are giving an opportunity to everyday people on both sides of the border. 888-416-8333 is our number. Let's get to another caller. And I don't even know who that caller is right now, but if we've got one, hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, John, are you there?
Oh, yes, I'm here.
Yeah, this is John. Our caller is John Scopp in Vancouver. I should say, for people who are watching and listening, we are juggling a lot of things here on multiple networks, a computer document in front of us that has a lot of information on it. John, you're in Vancouver. And how would your life change? Because I think this is something that you've talked about and you'd like to talk about. How would your life change if Canada were a state?
Well, first, I just want to point out that over 90% of Canadians want no part of this. So becoming part of the U.S. would be by force if they could somehow overcome our own fierce resistance. So is anybody on this program invoking international law and clearly saying that one country taking over another is 100% illegal? I mean, we're going to have a program next from the Ukrainian-Russian border asking how Ukrainians feel about Russia's friendly proposition to make them part of Russia. I mean, come on, folks. This is outrageous.
Yeah.
I am a dual citizen. My wife and daughter and I moved here 20 years ago, basically to get out of the U.S. to make a better life for our daughter. I was, occasionally an activist in the U.S., and I felt bad about leaving. I do what I can from here. That's why I remained a U.S. citizen, so I can vote. But I just find it outrageous that we can contemplate this without bringing up the fact that we're talking about insane aggression here.
Yeah,
I'm no part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it is so hard, John, for a lot of people to figure out how to even react to these comments, because on the one hand, I know a lot of people who don't even take it seriously, number one. Number two, people who don't want to give it oxygen or talk about it out loud because they think by doing that is going to create a problem, and maybe it'll turn into something. But then there are others who say, listen, this is serious. He may be serious, and it is important to be very public about, opposition to it.
Oh, sure. But I think, I don't hear talk about international law and the fact that what he's talking about is an act of war. And it should be looked at as that. Yeah, very seriously.
Yeah.
And that it's an act of war, and we should be clearly stating that.
Yeah. All right, John, thank you very much for your call. Our number here is 1-888-416-8333, whichever side of the border you're on. Jeremy, I saw, it was like watching the Indy 500 and the pit crew comes in working on a racing car. And in this case, there was an issue with your computer?
No. So I'm the visitor here because I'm here in your home in Vancouver at CBC Vancouver. I'm on the Wi-Fi and it died. So I lost my whole little thing that tells me who's on the lines.
We have the weirdest Wi-Fi that about every 45 minutes or so, it kicks people out, and then you have to pledge the fact that you're not going to do anything bad on our Wi-Fi.
Okay, well, now I'm back, and Scott Hill is with us from Salt Lake City, Utah, in the United States. Scott, what do you make of Trump's comments?
Hey, thanks for having the show. I find it really interesting to hear from Canadians. I've visited Western Canada a couple of times, and I really like it up there. But what I'm thinking is, I wish it could be the opposite. You guys come down here and get rid of this idiot that we got in here. And I'll tell you what, take whatever he says seriously, because he's really screwing things up down here. What I really like, though, back during Obamacare, I was asking Canadian tourists how they like their health care, because there's so much people down here were saying, it's no good, it's no good. So I asked 9 out of 10 Canadians that I talked to about it. They love their health care. And thank goodness for Obama. I got on Obamacare, and he actually saved my life with open heart surgery. And this guy's got to go. So
you would be.
I wish
but,
it was the other way.
But just to be clear, Scott, you're saying you would, if it was the other way around, you'd be happy if Canada was turning the U.S. into the 11th province?
I think it would be a better situation in a lot of ways with the health care and in a lot of ways. Yeah. But I still, I'm American, so that's a little hard. But I like the way you guys run things better than we're running them right now, that's for sure.
Scott, thank you very much for that call.
And I should point out, anyone who's listening in Canada right now, they may be proud to hear an American say that Canadians have a better healthcare system. But, each of our countries is imperfect. And there are a lot of people that would like to see major reforms in our healthcare. Not an American system, but although there's some that may like that too. But there are many people who would just like to see a better Canadian healthcare system. This is a cross-border conversation on Cross Country Checkup and The Middle. Jeremy Hobson, the host of The Middle. We're being heard on the CBC Network, also on NPR stations, and on C-SPAN television in the United States. Our number 1-888-416-8333. Shane McLean is in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Hi, Shane.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So we are looking for various points of view on this program, and there's been a level of unanimity to this point, not because we sought that out, but because that reflects the calls and online comments that we're getting. But what's your view of Trump's comments about 51st state?
I think he's very serious about it. One thing I've learned over the media since COVID is, if they talk a lot about something over and over, it's going to happen. I think it'd be a good thing for Canada.
You think it would be a good thing for Canada to be the 51st state?
Absolutely.
And so, did you say why not?
We export everything to them anyways. Mm-hmm. I worked in the oil sands for a major part of my career. Now I work in agriculture. I know how important the U.S. is for oil. It drove my work my whole life. We can't do without them.
Right, but there's a difference.
If we join.
So I feel like there are going to be a lot of people who are listening, and I welcome them to call in at 888-416-8333, who would be shocked that you would so comfortably talk about our country, Canada, giving up its sovereignty.
We're not free at all.
In what way are we not free, Shane? Shane, in what way are we not free?
We're not free. My boy is 10 years old. I have an 8-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old. I can't even get a family doctor for them. How crazy is that? When I pay half my taxes, half my wages in tax, and I can't benefit from it.
Yeah, so that is a problem. The lack of family doctors is definitely a problem in Canada.
Yeah, what are they doing to fix this? They're sending all our money away.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like in the United States, there are people that probably also don't have family doctors, right?
Well, it's privatized. You can get it.
If you have the money, I guess.
Or health care.
Yeah.
From your work.
Okay, well, Shane, I'd clearly you're unhappy with the situation in Canada for you, and you're willing to.
There's a lot of people out here in the West that support it. I see it. It makes sense.
Who actually, a lot of people among your friends or people you deal with who actually support the idea of Canada giving up its sovereignty.
But I'm from the East Coast originally, and I see their views, right?
Yeah.
It's totally different, right? It's both sides. Canada's split. Both sides, different views. 100%.
Very interesting to hear that call, Ian. And I should note, by the way, that this whole conversation that was started by President Trump saying this has kind of flipped Canada politics on its head, and you've got an election coming up in a matter of months.
Yeah, but I mean, the other thing, and I mentioned this earlier, I think when I was talking to David Frum, the extent to which there is a unanimity among political leaders wherever they happen to be on the political spectrum. The polling I've seen overwhelmingly shows people not only reject the idea of Canada as the 51st state, but it just makes them very unhappy and angry. So, yeah, interesting to hear Shane's point of view. You could tell by the tone of my voice, I find it surprising. Yeah. But this is a program where we want to hear different points of view, and we can hear yours at 888-416-8333. Let's look at some of the reaction we're getting online. Audrey Weaver from Surrey, British Columbia, just outside Vancouver, on AirCheck says, in 1975, my husband and I chose to emigrate to Canada. Next month will be our 50th anniversary of settling in Canada and subsequently becoming Canadian citizens. We made our choice to become Canadians, not Americans, and would like to live the rest of our lives as Canadians. Our neighbors below the 49th parallel probably would not want a change of citizenship imposed on them either. Let's continue to strive for peace, harmony, unity, and mutual respect between all nations and individuals. Susan Connors in Nova Scotia and wrote on AirCheck, language matters. When one country wants to take over and force their laws and culture on another, that's occupation. The word annexation makes it seem as if there's a nice, smooth transition to the new order of things. There is nothing nice about the U.S. wanting to occupy Canada and forcibly take our resources for themselves.
The Canada-U.S. relationship is most deeply felt along border states, and today's special is being broadcast in border states like Vermont, New York, Michigan, Minnesota, North Dakota. Former Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp represented North Dakota in the Senate from 2013 to 2019, coinciding with the first Trump presidency, and she joins us now from Chicago. Senator, thank you so much for being here. What was your reaction when you first heard, and now have heard multiple times, Trump say he wants Canada to be the 51st state?
Well, it was done in the context of also looking at Panama, also looking at Greenland. And I thought, you know, you can argue that America's been economically colonizing the world for a long time, but now we're actually looking at becoming a colonizing country again. And the one thing that I know from having served in the Senate and actually spending time with the former president, now President Trump, is that he doesn't say stuff willy-nilly. It's a test to see how far he can go. And he's serious about Canada becoming the 51st state.
And would he use force, do you think, to do that? Or is it economic force? Or how do you think he would accomplish that if he's being serious about it?
Well, he's already exerting economic force, right? 25% tariffs on steel, which actually hurts America more than I think Canada. Canada is a major exporter of energy. If you take energy out of the mix in our Canadian relationship, we actually have a balance of trade that favors the United States if you take energy out. And so, I mean, I think that he looks at as one of your callers said, at the resources. And, you know, I don't know if he knows that, you know, in the United States, minerals are owned by individuals unless they're on public land. In Canada, they're owned by the Crown. So maybe he's after a lot of your minerals. Maybe he's after your oil and gas. I don't know. But it's hubris and it is dangerous because those of us who live in northern states like North Dakota, those of us who went to a college like the University of North Dakota, where, you know, probably 10% of the student body were Canadian. Some of my best friends are from Canada. And I think that we're nervous about people booing our national anthem, which has never happened in Canada. People feeling like we're predators, which we're not. The United States is not a predator. We have a president who wants to push this envelope, but I would suggest to everybody in Canada, you can't be too vigilant. You know, when I first heard it, I do a lot of commenting for other networks, and basically I said, you know, he's serious. Don't poo-poo this. He is serious, and he now has put sovereignty on the ballot in Canada.
Why do you think so many of your former colleagues in the Senate and governors have been so quiet about this so far? Is it just because there are so many other things that Trump is doing right now that they're focused on, or are they afraid to speak up and give it any weight?
Oh, they hope it goes away. They hope that it goes away. We haven't heard much about Panama, since he said that. And so they're like, I can't deal with that. I can't deal with all of the incoming. I've got people now in record numbers calling my office. And I can tell you in the United States that the Senate switchboard is overwhelmed with people calling, very concerned about their privacy, very concerned about the cutbacks in national parks, whatever it looks like. And so, this has fallen to the back burner. And, it's not a joke in Canada, but it's something that I think so many members of Congress hope gets forgotten and left behind.
Trump has said that he feels Canada is ripping the United States off. What do you think about that? I mean, and when you think about the economic activity that goes across the border and how each side benefits from the other.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I've said repeatedly is when he talks about these are the worst trade agreements. I was there when he renegotiated NAFTA into the USMCA. I mean, this is his trade agreement, and it's up for renegotiation. And so in the typical way that governments act is they say, look, this hasn't worked for us. Let's renegotiate. Let's take a look at the relationship. But as I said in the beginning, if you take energy out of the mix, Canada is actually a very, very significant importer of goods and services from the United States of America, and certainly in states like mine, a huge trading partner. The cross-border trade that comes from North Dakota to Manitoba and Saskatchewan is overwhelming. We share the Bakken, when you look at oil development. When I was in state government in North Dakota, we did a whole project with Canada on hydraulic fracturing along with horizontal drilling. And so we have this long relationship with Canada that I think is unbreakable because it's based on mutual trust. It's just when the head of your country says something as absurd as we think Canada should be the 51st state, you just cringe and hope that everybody understands that there will be enormous pushback if there is any attempt to exercise any kind of military intervention to make it happen. I think he just thinks that he's so popular, he's so amazing that everybody up in Canada goes, we want that guy. And I don't think that's true. Based on your calls, it doesn't sound like that's true.
Well, and by the way, if we're going by the North Dakota rules in terms of population, it would be at least 15 states for Canada. There's 40 million people, right?
Right. I mean, and I doubt that he would want each province of Canada to come in as a state.
Right.
It'd be pretty dangerous politically for the Republican Party.
That is former U.S. Senator Heidi Heitkamp, a Democrat, joining us from Chicago. Senator, thank you very much.
You bet. Take care.
And Ian, we did find a high-profile Canadian businessman who doesn't see this as an insult. We're going to talk with him shortly, but for the moment, our number 888-416-8333, 888-416-8333, and our question: what do you think of Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st state?
And do you want to take this next caller?
Oh, I can. Sure. David Rovinsky is with us from Burlington, Vermont. David, what are your thoughts? Are you being impacted by Trump's comments so far about Canada?
Well, hi, good afternoon. Well, this has affected me actually professionally because I am a political scientist, an American political scientist, and for decades I've done research and I've written about and I've taught about Canadian politics at American universities. I'm also the secretary of an academic group called the Association for Canadian Studies in the United States, and we exist to promote Canadian studies at American universities. We have about 1,000 members. And what we're doing right now is organizing our biennial conference in Seattle this November, starting November 13th. We usually hope for somewhere around 200 to 300 papers, and we've actually been having a lot fewer submissions than usual, mostly because a lot of the Canadians who participate in the conference, who regularly participate every 2 years, have told us they're not coming this year. Partly it's for a number of reasons. Partly it's the Canadian dollar. Partly it's worry that they are not going to be able to get across the border easily, and partly that they do not want to be supporting American conferences. So it's kind of strange. We are not a political organization, but it seems that we've hit the point where our simply doing research on Canada has become a political act here in the United States. And it's we're taking sides in politics simply by existing. And that's not our intention, but we think that when incidents like this happen, when ridiculous statements like calling for Canada to be annexed, to be the 51st state, as Trump puts it, it's one of the reasons that we believe our organization, it's important that our organization plays an important role in maintaining Canada-U.S. relations.
David, thank you very much for that. And Ian, I'm glad that he brought up the fact that people may not want to travel to the U.S. because that is a part of the story that I think a lot of Americans don't even realize right now, but that there is kind of a boycott going on by many Canadians of American goods and American travel.
Yeah, a lot of people taking that very seriously. I have a group of friends who normally never talk about things political, and I see them usually on the weekend. And for weeks now, they've been talking about how diligently they've been trying to source Canadian as opposed to American products and not going down to the United States. We're into the last half hour of our cross-border conversation. Our number is 1-888-416-8333. You can also reach us by going to cbc.ca/aircheck. Our question: what do you think of Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st state? Carla Joubert is in Joliet, Illinois. Hi, Carla.
Hi.
You are Canadian living in the United States, and so I talked about my circle of friends. What are you hearing from yours?
I mean, it's a little bit of a blend. I think on the one hand, I have friends who are very tapped in politically and we're very concerned. You never know when to take him seriously and when not to. And I think there's been a lot of discussion here. But I think there's also, particularly from the Americans, an effort to make light and to hope that this is just a joke in a list of long, blustering political actions by him. And then on the other hand, I do think there's fear. And for me, as the Canadian over here, they make jokes and we laugh, but I'm definitely frustrated, feeling very patriotic and insistent that the joke's only so funny,
Yeah, I mean, I could see where that could be a little tiresome after a while. So do you try to convince your American friends who aren't taking this seriously to start doing that?
I try to convince a lot of people of a lot of things, I guess, but I think that I just want them to put it in the appropriate historical context and to understand that the United States, is a settler colony. I'm a historian by trade, and it has a history of expansionism as policy. It has a history of westward expansion when it was at its height in the 1840s through 1880s. They had ideas like continentalism, right? The idea that the United States should cover the whole continent. And I thought we had gotten past that. I think we should have, but I don't think we should dismiss it as a historic American political policy that is worthy of our appropriate consternation at this time.
So as a thoughtful Canadian living in the United States, help other Canadians on the northern side of the border, how do you think they should be reacting to Trump's comments?
I think on the one hand, another caller already mentioned this is really an international law issue. Canada is a proud member of NATO. A NATO nation under attack means a NATO under attack, which is my way of saying I don't think there's actually a great deal of weight to the threats. I don't think that the United States is about to go to war with much of continental Europe and Canada. On the other hand, what it does mean is he is serious. He is dismissive of our leadership, our sovereignty, our autonomy. And I think we should take that aspect seriously for what it means, which is this is a man who doesn't take Canada's rights as a nation seriously, and he deserves our ire and not to be dismissed. He could do a lot of harm in pursuit of his high-minded, or highfalutin, ideas. Yeah.
Carla, the difference between highfalutin and high-minded for sure. Thank you very much for calling the program, Carla. Thank you. Yeah. And just to note, the Minister of National Defense, the Canadian Minister of National Defense, Bill Blair, says that while U.S. President Donald Trump has made concerning comments about absorbing Canada, they should not be taken as a serious threat. So that is one of the senior political officials in Canada.
It's been very interesting to see the difference and hear the difference between callers with many different views talking to us in a very civil way, and what has the conversation that happens on social media, which is a lot angrier. This is one of the reasons why I think it's great that this opportunity is being provided on both sides of the border for people to take part in this discussion. I was thinking, after having seen some of the commentary online, the only time I've ever had seen a Canadian be rude to me was I was in Montreal. I took a right on Red, which you're not allowed to do there, and a guy came up on his bike next to me. He said, "Do you like knuckle sandwiches?" And I was like, "Oh God, I'm so sorry I did that." Well, now I've seen the online vitriol, but at least we haven't had that on the show.
I mean, you were reading some of the posts on X/Twitter, and I remember yesterday you kind of read a few of them directed to you, right. And you said, "I wish I hadn't read that."
Right. We can't read them on the air right now. Let's go to Dakota, who's calling from Mississauga, Ontario, right next to Toronto. Dakota, welcome. And how is this all making you think about Canada's relationship to the United States?
Well, I've been very skeptical progressive for a long time. I've always voted like NDP or Greens in the elections, like just recently even. And I'm originally from BC, from Kamloops, and I've come on the show a couple of times. I've taken some very interesting takes for someone who's progressive, but I think that now's not the time to be skeptical of a country's sovereignty like Canada, right? We're part of the G7, and we have this power, and yet to the United States, Donald Trump's kind of treating us like, the dirt under his boots, and I think that that's not okay. And this has kind of changed how I view and how I go about my everyday life since coming to university, since Trump's come in, and everything like that. Originally, I was going to go on this. I've been wanting to go on this big road trip from Kamloops, BC, which is in the interior British Columbia, all the way up the Alaska Highway through Jasper up to Anchorage. And this has been something I've been wanting to do since I've been like 15. And my great granny, who's probably listening right now, hi. But she's finally, she's given me her car. And I was so excited to do it this summer. I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go all the way up there. And I've had to tell myself, like, this is something I've wanted to do for so long. But I can't.
You don't want to go to the United States?
Absolutely not. No, I've completely switched to buying Canadian products. I've tried to only buy at Canadian chains. Like I've stopped going to like Wendy's and things like that. I started going to like Harvey's and A&W, which is Canadian owned, which is a Canadian company now. Right. So things like that, like really trying to completely change my habits.
Yeah. I will say, Ian, I had a Tim Hortons coffee today just because, I'm here. I should have it while I'm here.
Yeah. Although was pretty good. A lot of people would say that's a Brazilian company, but still,
okay.
But definitely very much identifies as a Canadian.
Right.
Do you want to take this?
Let's squeeze in one more call. Catherine's calling from Glens Falls, New York, in the U.S. Catherine, quickly tell us, what do you think about Trump's comments about Canada as the 51st state?
I think it's despicable. We love Canada. We spent our vacation there last year. My daughter goes there all the time. I don't even know what to say about our president.
Do you take it seriously? Do you think he's being serious?
Oh, him? Yes, because he's a liar. He's a convicted felon. Yeah. What do you think?
What do you say to the Canadian? Well, what do you say to the Canadians who are listening to this right now? What would your message be to them?
Oh, please, don't hold it against all of us that love Canada.
Yeah. Catherine, thank you very much for that. Ian, so many different calls, so many different perspectives. We've heard from an American who believes that Trump is serious, but that maybe Canadians would like to be part of the United States. From a Canadian who wants to be part of the United States. We've heard from, of course, many Canadians who don't want that. respect their own sovereignty, and also many Americans who are apologetic, just like we just heard there from New York.
We have about a minute before we take a break for our NPR stations, and I just want to ask you a quick question, Jeremy, about why the interest on the American side of the border to take this program? And was it a difficult sell to them?
No, and I think the reason is because there is such an incoming right now from the Trump administration, whether it is the things that Elon Musk is doing across the federal government, the firings across the federal government, Trump saying that he wants to take Gaza, Greenland, the Panama Canal, Canada, changes in our policy toward Ukraine. And I think that people are interested in programs like this where we can zero in on one thing, take the time to talk about it, hear from different perspectives, allow ordinary people into the conversation. And that's what we're trying to do here. I will just give our phone number one more time, 888-416-8333, 888-416-8333, or you can go to cbc.ca/aircheck.
This is a cross-border conversation. We're down now to the last 20 minutes, so running out of opportunities to be on the program, but we still have some slots left, so hopefully you will do that. Our question, what do you think of Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st state? We're live on CBC News Network, CBC Radio, C-SPAN, and some NPR stations. And I would like to mention all the people who were involved in putting this program on this week. Our phone screeners are Bisma Mogul, Drew Stewart, Hannah Abrahamsey, Mark Hennick, and Chloe Kim. And it has not been easy going through all the callers who have called in. Hopefully everyone has been civil, but I know there's been a big volume of calls, so thanks to them. Our TV team is Spencer Halliday, Garth Gottfried, Alexa DeFrancesco, Nathan Han, and Richard Grundy. Audio production and editing from Will Yar, Sofian Alkurdi, and Aronde Williams. A cross-border conversation was produced this week by Abby Plenner, Kiara Greco, Maya Zaid, Theo Van Buzicom, and Harrison Patino. Digital producer is Sinisha Yolich, and the senior producer of the program is Richard Goddard. I'm Ian Hanomansing, and Jeremy Hobson is sitting next to me, the host of The Middle, and we still have more to come on our cross-border conversation. So a lot of people are wondering if Trump really is thinking seriously about making Canada the 51st state. So we wanted to connect with someone who has spoken to him and may be able to give us some insight. Kevin O'Leary is a Canadian who does business on both sides of the border. He was one of the panelists, investors on the CBC show Dragon's Den, and is currently on the U.S. equivalent, Shark Tank, and he's chairman of O'Leary Ventures and joins us today from Toronto. Hi, Kevin.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Now, based on your conversations with President Trump, why does he keep talking about Canada as the 51st state?
He's taking a shot at Trudeau, who he dislikes immensely, and Freeland, who keeps poking at him. I think after 12 years of Donald Trump, people would understand how he operates. Shooting barbs at him doesn't work, doesn't help anything right now. And unfortunately, we have a leadership void in Canada. Federal government's collapsed. We await a new election. And Trump is just sitting here watching Trudeau send out these tweets to him that he doesn't like. It's not helping anything. Justin, and I'm sorry to be critical, but it's time for him to go. It really is.
Yeah, but as you know, Kevin, he is going. The government, in fairness, hasn't collapsed, and soon there will be a new leader, a new prime minister, right?
That's the problem.
What's that?
What we need is someone with a 4-year mandate to negotiate with Trump. We don't have that. We have a void. So Trump's just taking shots all day long.
Yeah.
And he's having a lot of fun with it, too, at our expense.
Do you think, Kevin, that there's any chance that Trump seriously believes that Canada should become the 51st state?
I've said this countless times about this situation. I've got great examples to give you right now, okay? Let's just talk about the noise and the signal. The noise is Trump saying outlandish, outrageous, all kinds of bombastic comments. But what's in the signal? What's the opportunity is what we should be looking at. And what he's been saying consistently is that there's a huge economic opportunity combining the economies. Now, obviously, he's starting, and everybody thought, oh, he's just picking on Canada. Every single country on earth right now is on notice. every single one, that there's going to be reciprocal tariffs. It's the beginning of a giant global negotiation on trade with the United States. We're just one country. We have 2.5% of the world's GDP. We've got to obviously figure out a way to negotiate when we have no leadership. That's going to be very tricky for the next 6, 8, 9 weeks, whatever it's going to be. But think about this. Instead of getting into a war of rhetoric with him, which we're doing right now, why wouldn't we explore the opportunity? And I would suggest there's 3 things that we could be looking at. Every single one of our commodities and resources and rare earths and minerals is denominated in US dollars, not just domestically, globally, including oil and gas. So why don't we move towards a common currency in North America, which would be very easy to do. 11 out of 10 Canadians would love to trade their Trudeau pesos for US dollars. We know that already. So it's a very, very easy ride there. We could ask for the Bank of Canada to get 2 seats on the Fed board if we're going to combine currencies so that we have some control over interest rates. Number 2, get rid of all tariffs, all north, south, and east, west in Canada. You know, you can't buy BC wine in Quebec and all the rest of this stupid stuff we do to each other in dairy and all kinds of wheat board pricing and whatever it is that we do. We get rid of all that because the guys in Vermont, for example, are really, really unhappy with us on dairy. We spend billions of dollars subsidizing dairy and then pour it down the drain, collapsing the price. It's ridiculous what we do to ourselves, but that also would be solved. So no tariffs. And lastly, an EU-type passport where we could, once approved on both sides, an individual would be free to roam anywhere in North America. Now, the Indigenous people of Canada have that right now. Many people don't understand that. It's a right they really enjoy. They move freely over the borders. Yeah. And that's what all Canadians should be able to do if we had that right.
Look, I'm not going to.
That's the opportunity.
I'm not going to challenge you on the, all the things you're saying, like Trudeau pesos. I mean, it is the Canadian dollar. It's not the Trudeau peso. But I don't want to lose sight of the main point here. And I have lots of calls I want to get to as well. So let me say this. You asked rhetorically, I suppose, why wouldn't Canadians do it? Well, right now, a lot of Canadians are really angry at the United States, especially over the tariff threats by Trump. Let me finish, Kevin. They don't trust the president. They see what he said about tariffs and how it changes all the time, how he's threatening to disrupt, for example, the auto industry that has worked seamlessly for years in Michigan and Ontario and other places. And I'll bet you there are people listening right now who are saying, how could we possibly trust the United States to make closer economic relationships?
Because there's a common opportunity. That's why. Look, I understand people being angry. And it's unfortunate we're in this void of leadership. We don't have anybody to go down there and talk to him because we're waiting to elect a new leader with at least a 4-year mandate, we hope. But having said that, having watched Trump for 12 years, everybody should understand he's not going to change. And so rather than get angry, you don't get any opportunity out of anger, constructively think of how the opportunity could benefit Canadians. You don't like the word Trudeau peso. The Canadian dollar's lost 41% of its value. Canadians can't take their kids to Disneyland anymore.
It's lost 41% of its value since when?
Since the beginning of Trudeau, over 9 years. Go back and look at the charts. He wiped out the country. He and his policies that stopped capital from coming in. Gerald Butts wrote policies that took away the rights for people to invest in this country without permits that he never issued. And if you watch every metric, every economic, people say, oh, this is being negative. These are facts. Well, deal with it. Deal with it. They're facts. Yes, it lost 41% of its value. Yes, we don't invest in Canada anymore. Yes, CPP won't invest in its own country. Yes, foreign capital doesn't come here anymore. Yes, we are very uncompetitive. We're at the bottom of the G7.
All right.
Listen, Justin Trudeau. You may not like it, but that's what he did to the country.
Yeah, I'm not saying I like it or don't like it. I just, but I guess the kind of yes, no, if possible. I just want to get it clear in my mind. Do you think that there's any chance that Donald Trump actually believes that Canada should be the 51st state?
No.
Okay.
But is it a negotiating tool? Yes. Is there an opportunity? An immense opportunity. And if people don't get wise to that. Anger doesn't work in a negotiation. It doesn't work.
Well, then sometimes you have to be careful about making the other party angry.
It doesn't matter. The point is, don't look at that. That's not the opportunity. Tell me, if you took a poll, you have the opportunity to do it. I mean, my goodness, you talk to Canadians every day. Would you trade your Canadian dollar, as you call it, at parity to the U.S. dollar? If that was a negotiating chip, would you do it? How many would you say yes?
Yeah. All right. Let's leave it there, Kevin. Interesting to hear your point of view. We'd like to hear different points of views on this program, and that's what we're aiming to do. So thank you for joining us.
Take care.
Kevin O'Leary, Canadian business person who does business on both sides of the border, chairman of O'Leary Ventures, and he is in Toronto.
Let's get back to the phones, and Marcellus Atkins is calling from Ottawa, Ontario. Marcellus, you're calling from Ontario, but you are an American living there. What do you think about all this?
Yeah, correct. My wife and I live here in Ottawa. And first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I really do appreciate an opportunity to add my voice to this conversation. I am a U.S. military veteran also. So living here, one of the things in the military is, we were always taught to respect our commander-in-chief, the president. And at this point, I just want to say, to anyone listening, I do not. I cannot, because the president's supposed to be the best of us, and this is not what we're seeing. Concerning the 51st state comments, in my opinion, I think one of the previous callers nailed it, saying that this rhetoric is truly, it's war. It's warfare. It's verbal warfare. Any country that tells another country, either you give me your sovereignty, you give me your land, or I'm going to punish your trade routes. I'm going to punish you with tariffs and things like that. Those are violent statements that should not be ignored by the international community. And I'm hoping that at some point something is done to kind of tone that down or eliminate that altogether. Concerning whether or not I think he's serious, only Donald Trump knows how serious he is, but I believe that Canadians need to take him seriously because he wants something. We don't know what it is, and he may not fully know what it is, but at some point I do believe it's going to come to light what he's after. And so I think that's, in my opinion, where, Canadians need to do what they're doing. And
well, Marcellus, let me just ask you a quick follow-up, which is, first of all, thank you for your service to the country. And if we were to play this out, and we heard from Senator Heidi Heitkamp, who actually believes that Trump is serious about this, if he were to somehow take Canada by force, people like you in the military would be involved in that. That's got to be just an unbelievable thing to even consider American, troops being involved in forcing their way in.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends in the military and our former military members. We've had these conversations. We're just dumbfounded. We're going, what would that even look like? I mean, would it look similar to the Civil War, where you've got, a civil war inside of America, where you've got troops firing on civilians? And I'm not trying to amplify it. I'm just saying, what would that even look like to have these nations, because we're so intertwined?
Right. How
would that even play out? So I'm with you. And my family, we're talking about, what are we going to do if it comes to that? Are we going to stay here, head out, fight? I mean, I'll fight alongside Canada. I'm telling you right now, we have a Canadian flag flying outside my home right now to show solidarity. And it's not that I'm turning my back on my country. I'm turning my back on Donald Trump. He is not representative of me. And if I could just quickly say one thing to Canadians, first of all, he does not speak for all Americans, so please understand that as you're dealing with us. We are not necessarily represented by this man. But additionally, I think, Jeremy, I don't know if you have children. I know, Ian, I think you're a grandfather is what I saw online, which is congratulations.
Thank you.
You, I'm sure will be teaching your kids to protect themselves against people who are trying to force them to do something they don't want to do. And one of the greatest things we can do is say no. And I would say to all Canadians, no means no. Donald Trump understands exactly what that means in his personal life, his professional life. No means no. Don't keep joking. Don't keep asking. I told you no. Stop. That, I think, needs to be the Canadian position is no means no. We're not giving in. Stop.
Marcellus, thank you very much for that call.
I love the fact he's flying a Canadian flag in the United States, or I guess he's in Ottawa now. He's an American living in Ottawa, but still, that's very interesting. And anyone who invokes my granddaughter in the conversation gets extra points.
I still
from me.
am trying to get over that. I mean, you look way too young to be a grandfather. But anyway,
it's all about good lighting. So we are in the last few minutes of the program here. So let's try to squeeze in a couple of calls. So an apology ahead of time to the people we're going to go to, because these will be quick. Eric Emmert is in Ithaca, New York. And Eric, how are you reacting to Trump's comments?
I thank you for taking my call. I don't like the way things are going, but I do want to say I think that the U.S. and Canada should become one country. I've thought that for many years.
But I mean, how would you feel about the United States becoming part of Canada?
That's impossible.
So when you say one country, you mean Canada US becoming part of the States. But, there are a lot of people up here, in fact, I would say the vast majority, who just find that absolutely untenable, even to hear the sentence.
I understand that, and I have sympathy for their way of life. I've spent a great deal of time in Toronto, and I'm in Montreal at the moment. It's a great country. It's a great city. Montreal is wonderful. Toronto. But I feel like we're being taken advantage of in the fact that, for example, people from Ontario come to Buffalo to work very frequently, but almost no one is able to come from the Buffalo area to Ontario because of the restrictions placed on employment.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's true, Eric. And I'd be curious to know what the restrictions are. But people can do their fact checking online after the program, because we have just a couple of minutes left. And I think maybe, Jeremy, we can do one more call.
So one more call, and we'll you know what? We'll end it with the Canadian caller. Okay. I think that's fair, since we're talking about Canada becoming the 51st state in this conversation, or at least Trump's comments about it. Derek is in St. Albert's, Alberta. Derek, what do you think?
Hi, thanks for having me on. I have a major problem with Donald Trump, with what he's saying. I think it's extremely dangerous and it's reckless. He's never going to be able to annex Canada. Like, we have several jurisdictions and provinces and territories, but we also have treaties with the Indigenous peoples. Like, there's 11 different treaties that span multiple provinces. You're never going to get a buy-in from every jurisdiction that way in order to make a move. I don't think you would even get any buy-in from any of the Indigenous peoples. So I don't think it could happen, personally.
Has it changed your relationship with the United States at all? Have you started boycotting any goods? Have you changed any travel plans, anything like that?
No, not for me, not like that. It's a president and his staff who are, I don't know if it's a joke or if it's a bargaining tactic that they have, but I understand American people are American people. I love both countries, but I do not want to be an American. However, I will continue to trade with them and buy their stuff, even if there's tariffs put in place. If I have my preferences, it's just the way it is. I'm not going to change what I'm doing. But I just think it's extremely reckless for the president to be doing that, because he's really eroding away, centuries or decades worth of goodwill between the two countries.
And what do you make of Kevin O'Leary's comments that we heard that basically this is a negotiating tactic, and that Canada should want a stronger and deeper economic relationship with the United States?
I agree with him wholeheartedly. That's what Donald Trump does. He'll say something that gets everybody running in circles, and then when the dust settles, his real agenda comes out. But he makes you dance, and then he wants what he wants. Kevin hit the nail on the head. I mean, he went off a little politically on it, but we'll leave it at that. But Kevin knows him well. So, but that's what Donald did the first 4 years he was the president. That's what he's going to do for this 4 years.
Derek, thank you very much for that call.
All right. Thanks so much.
Well, that is almost all the time we have today. Thanks to everyone who called and also reached out to us online, and to my co-host from the middle, Jeremy Hobson. Once again, second time we've done a co-production. The time before was from Detroit, just before the election. Here we do it again in Vancouver. It's been fantastic sharing a studio with you.
Absolutely. It has been a great pleasure. I want to thank a couple of people who made it possible, because this came together in about 10 days from like beginning to actual show. John Barth, my great colleague, who helped us get on C-SPAN, our friends at C-SPAN, who worked very quickly to get this on television in the United States, and to Jay Herrera at NPR for helping us get this on 170 NPR stations across the United States. That's not easy to do. We managed to do it. Hopefully they were happy with it. And thanks to all of you who called in. By the way, we do our show The Middle every single week. You can find it on the iHeart app or wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for The Middle with Jeremy Hobson.
And Richard Goddard is the senior producer of Cross Country Checkup. This was his brainchild to do that first show in Detroit and to do this show again. And he deserves all the kudos and bears all the scars that are involved in putting on a program like this. And one of my favorite parts about doing these shows, besides working with you, is the funky middle music.
Here it is. We're going to let the middle music play us out. Thank you so much for listening to A Cross-Border Conversation.